tuned to G, and people always assume like because you're tuned so low that you want so much bass, and actually no mega bass, just like darkness.
Stuck with the Bun.
Hello, I'm the Bun, and welcome to my channel. This is Stuck with the Bun. This is a show where we talk about things that you're stuck on, that I'm stuck on, things that I've been stuck on, and the whole idea is to get unstuck. So today we're talking about bass tone. I get a lot of comments about, how do I get the bass tone that I get? There's a lot of problems that come along with matching a bass to a super low tuning like low G, low F, etc. So typically you will get this new baritone guitar and you're like, amazing, I'm gonna be able to tune super low down to G and F and all that kind of stuff. And one of the first problems you encounter, even though the guitar is now sorted, even if you have a great guitar tone, is that the bass seems to be a problem. If you're recording or if you're playing in a live band, I'm pointing at all these things. Just tuning down a 34-inch scale bass, comes with a whole bunch of problems. A problem in terms of getting the bass to perform right and sound right in an octave down. So we're gonna take a look at how I work with bass guitar and match it to a low G and keep it clear, keep it tight. We're also gonna talk to my pal Nick Hill. He's an amazing producer, songwriter, guitar player, and he doesn't tune quite as low, but a lot of the same ideas exist, and he's got a great mind for mixing and the technicalities of producing music. So we're going to talk to him about bass as well. So you can address the super low bass accompaniment for your super low guitar in 3 different ways. You can do it with a bass that is super long scale, tuned an octave below. You can do it with a guitar or a bass tuned to the same octave and maybe pitched down. Or you can do it with a MIDI virtual bass like Euro bass. I did a video a little while ago on matching a bass to your baritone, and that video should address a lot of these things. We're not gonna get too heavy into that right now. So I use a bass tuned super low, and I use this here Dingwall. It is a combustion, Dingwall 5-string combustion. I don't have it because it has 5 strings. I don't care about the 5th string or the 1st string, the highest string. I don't really use that. I have it because the lowest string on the lowest side of the fretboard, it's much longer. It's 37 inches in scale. And that additional scale length allows me to tune the bass down quite a bit more than an average 34 or 35 inch scale bass. I tune this bass to G standard, the same as my guitars. While it's not absolutely perfect, I would like a little bit more scale length. It's as close as I can get for the budget that I have, and yeah, it's all I can do. I don't tune to F sharp or F because I can't get the bass to perform well, just that extra half step down or full step down. I stay to G because I can match the bass an octave down. So I do play these bass 6 type guitars. I have the SRC 6 and the Squier Jazzmaster Baritone. The Jazzmaster Baritone is 30 inches. They're both 30 inches and they're both tuned to standard E. The bass that I use for the bass 6s is just a regular 34-inch scale ATK premium bass, 4-string, tuned to E standard. And the only thing that's different is the tone. This has more of a bass tone in the production, and the guitars sound more like guitars. In addition to the bass itself, you're going to want to think about strings. I use these Callium strings. They are handmade by Callium. They're very expensive, but they last a very long time, and they work amazingly well. This set is, I believe, 176 to 59, or 59 to 176, however you want to. And they're stainless steel, so they're really bright for how big they are. And that's not always the case. Usually when you go really big strings, stuff gets dark and muddy and terrible. Stainless steel Calliums, awesome. If you're a pick player, using a pick that plays with enough flex that it's not displacing the string like gigantically really helps. If you play with fingers, like having amazing finger control in terms of your dynamics of your finger control. An effect that's really common in terms of controlling the bass is like a gain pedal. This here is the dark glass microtubes. The benefit of this pedal is that you tame the transients by adding a little bit of gain to the top end, and you get that natural compression that you get with gain, and it keeps the low end clean. So the low end stays tight, and it has a little bit of EQ on it. The bigger, the B7K, has more control than this. So the second option would be maybe the ODB3. This is a great pedal. Some people don't really understand the magic of this pedal. It sounds really great. If you pair this with SVT3, it's magical. Same idea, you can put gain on top, you can keep the low end clean and tight, and you mellow out those transients of the high end, and the low end stays clean, and you can better dial in a low tone. Also a noise gate, this is a decimator and it works pretty good. I don't like noise gates, but if you're gonna use some gain, you gotta kind of clean it up. Thirdly, I don't have one, is a compressor. A compressor can really help, once again, the transients, but also the boomy bottom. The Cali 76 and the 1176, the classic, they do a really good job of bass guitar. They're a classic choice for that. I did a review on this. You can find the video to this in the card and also in the links below. But this here is the Wounded Paw Bass 701. And this is an interesting box because it's focused on overdrive for bass. And it has this multi-band overdrive EQ section. So you apply overdrive to specific EQ ranges. And it also has a high cut, so you can cut all the hairy, gnarly stuff that you will get from the gain, which I love that feature so much. There is a newer version. There's maybe a couple newer versions than this one. This is an older one. This is an amazing box for live. I don't use it to record because I do everything in the computer, but when I play live, I use this box. It gives you a unique ability to control the bass for that gainy type of tone, but having a cleaner bottom end and having that aggression and not too much sub bass that you would get from the super low tuning, which you want to control, right? So you can control a little bit in the amp itself. In the effects loop, you can put effects there. You could put EQs there. You could put limiter there, that kind of stuff. When you put effects in the loop, it puts them between the preamp and the power amp section of the amp, and it gives you a different kind of control. I definitely prefer the sound coming out of the speakers as opposed to a DI. I find DI sucks. Not my favorite in any way. The cab and mic choice are gonna make a big difference. There are a lot of good mics, but I find the RE20, the Electro Voice RE20, to be my favorite. It's that big Canon looking one, it's gray. And also the speakers and the speaker configuration. You know, I use 10-inch speakers because I find 10-inch speakers do a really good job at cutting the mids I don't like, as well as keeping the bottom end tight, but still overall very dark. And I find more 10s, more than 4, very helpful. I find 410 not enough. You know, it need to go 6. I got a 610 configuration here. 610, 810, you know, 1610, 2 810s. I used to do that. So I've been talking to my pal Nick Hill about this, and he's a really amazing producer. He just released a new record called Ample Chattels. It's a EP. You can check that out. Check out his YouTube channel. He's awesome at mixing. He does a lot of focus on the Line 6 Helix. So we're gonna talk to Nick about how he likes to work with the bass and what drives him crazy about the bass. Brother Nick Hill, how are you?
Bun, what's going on, man?
We've been talking about bass lately.
Yeah.
And I'm doing a video about bass and how to get that crushing bass sound for heavy guitars, heavy music. I'd like to get a different point of view on it, and I'm wondering if you could share your ideas about how you go about it.
Yeah, dude, I'm bombarded as well with questions about bass. A lot of people love my guitar tones, but I don't think they realize that I like the bass to be the bass in my mixes. I kind of look at it as a sum of its parts. So when I'm going into a mix, I have 3 points that I try and put into play with each and every mix when I'm mixing heavy bass. The first note is the bass is the low end. My guitar tones tend to lack serious amounts of low end. I like to let my bass occupy the low end of the spectrum. I like to bring in that high end, nasty snarl, but you have to be sure to roll off some of that high end fizz. The second note is marry the bass to your guitars. Have it hug your guitars. I like to notch the mid-range of my bass, and depending on where my guitars are sitting, most of the time I'll shoot for 700 hertz and I'll dip substantially. The third thing is, and the most important, is tame those frequencies. Sometimes I start cutting lows starting at as high as 100 hertz. It just depends on the context of the mix. And remember, the bass is the bass. It's doing the heavy lifting. You want to make sure that you don't have frequencies build up, and sometimes that involves notching out certain high-end frequencies as well as that low mid-range frequency stuff.
Nick Hill, thank you so much for sharing that, dude. Is like, you have the sickest tone, man.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Dingwall active, I use it in passive mode. I don't use the active circuit. I don't use the EQ on it. I don't use the neck pickup. I only use the bridge pickup. We're gonna start with the clean tone, and this is what it sounds like with nothing. Kind of loose-ish sort of sounding. It's just DI. We're doing a 2 amp tone to have a clean side and a dirty side, but it's gonna be mono. If you're using Reaper, there is this width control right here, and it's usually set to 100% width. I make sure for the bass and the bass drum and anything that's supposed to be super mono, width set to 0, because I want a pure mono signal. And on the clean side, the very first thing that I put in there is an EQ. It's a pretty extreme EQ because this is for the low clean part of the bass tone. And the high clean is going to be very different. And I'll explain why as we get along. We turn that on and tightens it up, gets rid of the sub bass, the immediate sub bass that is produced, dips a little bit of that cardboard box 500 thing, and gets rid of all of the high end that we're going to take care of with the high gain sound. So next thing is a compressor. This is more of a limiter. It's an 1176 type of thing. I have it set to about like, you know, 1 dB of gain reduction. On heavier kinds of stuff, like heavier kind of picking, it'll go over that. The goal that we're achieving here, control the transients and tighten up the bottom end, just tighten up the overall bass sound so that it's more gonna be consistent underneath the guitars. Dynamics in a bass sound, particularly for the kinds of music that I play and a lot of you guys probably play, you kind of want a limit on the dynamics, and that's like in the pick, the picking technique, and the dynamics. You want to bring the lower volume stuff information up and the higher volume information down. That's what the limiter's doing. Getting to know exactly what a compressor is and exactly what a limiter is, how they function and how you can use them musically is very important. So next thing is the amp sim. This amp sim has the speaker, the built-in speaker, bypass. I love the SVT4 Pro or the SVT3 Pro. They're amazing. I'm not gonna go too deep into the settings. A lot of this is to taste, but I'm gonna talk about the control elements of this tone. I'm rolling off the sub bass here. At 300 Hertz, I'm dipped a lot on the graphic EQ, and then I can have this mild like little curve here on the top end. Even though most of this clean stuff is cut out in the final tone, I do this more to just smooth out the transition between the two amps, and you got to do that to taste. I have the ultra low engaged here. I don't like sub bass. Sub bass is a huge problem. You got to cut the sub bass, but there's something about this ultra low button that gives me this solidness in the lower mids that I like for bass, like the 100 Hertz range. It's way better than actually adding 100 Hertz in an EQ. I don't know why. So are we engaged? We're not engaged. Let's check it out. It's a little tighter, a little darker. A lot of the high end is kind of smoothed off. So I'm using torpedo wall sound. You can use any suite. Just find a cab that you like. I'm using a Ampeg 8x10 sim with a RE20. Quite a few of the mics in here sound good. I find this mic on this cab is a good balance between like a tight solid low end and darkness. And then engaged. There's something about 10-inch speakers, man. I just love it. You really hear it on the low side of the, like on the really low notes. It's just solid and tight and dark, but not, there isn't an enormous amount of sub bass in the signal, but it's very dark. You know, we're tuned to G, and people always assume like because you're tuned so low that you want so much bass, and actually no mega bass, just like darkness. Very different than a whole bunch of sub bass. You'll also notice in Wall of Sound suite here that I'm using none of the processing, 0, and only one side, only one cab. I'm not using like 2 cabs here, and it's pan center and input to the output. Gain unity, gain staging, something to know about, something to study, something to take seriously. So the final EQ. You'll notice like I'm cutting the low bass at 75 hertz. Very high. It just really works for what I'm doing. It keeps these low notes tight. Let's listen to it. Boom. And it's all cut. There's no boost happening in the bass at all. So I'm cutting, it's very similar to the very first EQ. I got, you know, a cut at 75, 500 hertz dip, and the high frequency roll off is like just past 1K. It's like 1.5K. It's a long roll off at 1.5K because it's kind of cross over into the high frequency bass tones so that there's still some body up there. That's it for the clean portion of the bass sound. Let's move along to the dirty side. Boom. And we can kind of hear a little bit of phasing going on there because there's two signals now playing. So the first EQ. This first EQ, it's extreme because that's all I want from the dirty side. It's a little bit lower than where the guitar bump, the upper mid boost of the guitar bump is like 2.634 kilohertz. I don't know, somewhere around there. The high frequency of the bass is a little bit lower than that, you know, about 1K is what I've carved out. And it's so extreme. But let's engage that. You're not going to hear much of a difference right now, you know, but that phasing is gone. So moving along, gain section here, and let's get this going. So once again, no cab from a Music Bias Effects, no cab, the Insane Satan, an overdrive just like you would on a guitar type of tone. The overdrive, same idea, no drive, all level, no tone adjustment. Got the main gate, like a gate in line, not the system gate going, and that helps clean it up. The patch here is very modest on the gain. You don't need much, especially if you're boosting the amp. The bass, no, like just 5. Mids dipped. The mids in the gainy portion of a bass signal, you don't want them boosted too much because the guitars are already boosted. You just want to smooth over the transients. What happens with the gain is it just softens all the transients because it's a natural type of compression. And it also sounds really aggressive and it mixes into the guitars. It allows the bass to mix under the guitars or mix with the guitars. Really nice. And I've been doing this for, I don't know, 20 years. I've been doing the same thing. So this post EQ, really all that's going on here is like a high cut and a low cut. Let's listen to what that sounds like. Wow. No cab. Okay, so we all know what no cab sounds like on a guitar tone. We're gonna turn the cab on now. We'll talk about what the cab is all about in a second. So, and already sounding kind of cool. It's got that growl, but it's very subdued and it sounds kind of weird by itself, but it's gonna mix with guitars really nicely. And if you listen to any of my music, this is kind of what's going on. Stainless steel strings, like, so aggressive. Going back to the cab, there's nothing really special. Same idea, it's pure mono. I'm using another 810. Same one. What's different with the cab on the dirty side is the microphone. The microphone, this one cuts a little bit more of the high frequency. It makes it a little bit more nasally. And then the final thing is the EQ. Let's open that up. And it's the same as the beginning because the amps introduce like certain harmonics and whatnot. Some of which I don't want, so this EQ is exactly the same as the very first one, and let's engage that. Gets way more mellow. So this part, now that the patch is complete and everything's there, this is where you balance things out. So we're gonna bring the clean part of the tone down. What do we got for level? So there you go. At this point, you blend to taste and you will mix it into your guitars depending on how much level you have. You'll notice here that I have a fader bass group. Both of these faders group to this fader here. So if I bring that down, very quiet. If I bring that up, So the benefit of this is once I have my clean and my dirty tones balanced the way that I think I like, and it sounds good in a mix, then I will just use that fader, the bass group, in order to balance it out in the actual mix, to actually bring the bass into the mix. You could technically put more effects on this. You could put a limiter on this and limit that even further. There is a lot of processing in my bass patches, and I typically try to use the least amount of processing possible because I think it has a big effect on the organic quality, the overall end sound quality. I know a lot of people go crazy with like insane amounts of plugins and processing and all these mix tricks and whatever. Everybody's different. Everybody has a different method. If you like using tons of processing and you like that like plasticed over kind of sound, you should go for that. The sound you like is the sound you should go for. I'm just giving you how I do it, and maybe it will help you do what you want to do. I hope that helps you guys think about putting this bass sound together. I get so many questions about how do I get that bass sound? That's it for this. Let's answer some questions. I think it's about that time. Holy jeez. First question is from John Wayne. How are you, John? I hope your day is awesome. Hope you're playing riffs and loving your tone, and yeah.
Just because it's tuned in the baritone range doesn't make it a baritone built guitar. Any lower sound producing string needs a longer length for optimal sound. The builders selling standard scales as baritones are just being speculative. Your videos are good, but this one is plain misinformation.
So this is a comment on a tuning or a scale length. John, I'm not trying to be a dick, but I don't think you watched the whole video, because I'm pretty sure like I covered that somewhat explicitly. For those of you who haven't seen that video, the link will be down below. The whole point of that video was to determine what is baritone. Baritone is not a scale length specifically. Baritone is just a tuning range, or a range of pitches. It is lower than soprano and alto, and it is higher than bass. And that's important because knowing where that range is tells us a lot about what other things need to be, such as scale length. And in this video, I talk about the bass guitar, and basses are typically a lot longer than a guitar. 25.5 inch scale guitar, 34 inch scale bass. Why is the bass 34 inches in scale? Because it produces a whole octave down pitch. So of course we want to extend the scale of a guitar if we want to produce much lower pitches than E standard or D standard. E down to C about isn't very low. But as soon as you get to B and lower, things start to get a little bit washy. You can do B on a 25.5. It works. It works quite reasonably. It's not terrible. It's better if the scale is longer. And as you go down in pitches, it's going to be better if the scale is appropriately longer. And I have a video, 6 different scale lengths for baritone tuning or going super low or something like that. If you did watch the whole video, and this is just kind of like your reaction, I think we're just like missing paths. I think we're talking about the same thing. I definitely agree with you. Builders selling standard scales as baritones. So the Tremonti, the PRS Tremonti. I'm not crapping on PRS. This is what Tremonti wanted to do, not PRS. And his guitar is sold as a baritone. It's a 25.5 inch scale guitar, just sold in baritone tuning. Tuned to B in the store. Big deal. You can buy any 25.5 inch scale guitar and you can do the exact same thing with it as that guitar. Really weird decision, but it's Mike Tremonti's decision. PRS just obliged him. So I don't know, it's not a blame thing, it's just like, I don't think it's accurate in selling that guitar as a baritone guitar because it doesn't do the best job it could. Is the tuning baritone? Yes, tuning is baritone. But is the guitar optimized for baritone? No, it's not at all. So I agree with you. Companies shouldn't do that, and it's kind of weird. Next question is from Zvekit. I think I'm saying that right. Hope you're having an awesome day. Thank you for leaving a comment. This was left on the Can a Drop Replace a Baritone.
Ever tried dropping your tuning from E to B with this pedal and then adding a low octave with the Pog? I really hope it doesn't turn into complete mush.
So Zvekt, I was gonna try and do a little video about this exactly, but my pal Artie has the drop and he's using it to do some recording and writing, and I couldn't get a Pog or an octave pedal in time, but I can't do it yet, so I'm gonna just try and answer this. Whenever you do pitch augmentation downward in series, so multiples of pitch augmenters, in this case it would be the drop and then the pog, which is more of an multi-octave effect. Whenever you put them in line, you increase latency. It gets pretty gross. I haven't done this exact thing, but I've definitely played with multiple octavers, just fooling around, being stupid. Not saying that it's a stupid thing to do, but it sounds insane and and it's really gross. It's a whole pile of mush, as you say. We're gonna hopefully get around to this video, and it'll be a very short video on Facebook or Instagram. But I'm hopefully gonna do this because I think it'll just be fun. It'd be crazy. This question is from Joey Temper. How are you, Joey? I hope your day is awesome, and yeah, you're going super low and ripping your riffs. This is on the Ibanez RG IB6 baritone video.
I like this one, but I have a soft spot for the Chapman Baritone ML1. Which one would you recommend quality-wise, Bun?
The Chapman versus the RG IB6. Very common question. They're very similar. They're both 28 inches. They're both humbucker guitars. One is passive stock, one is active stock. I had the Chapman. I gave it away in a contest last summer. It was a very exciting time. I did a video on that guitar. You can check that out in the card above and in the links below. Is the ML1 any good? Yes. It's different now. They're making it in another factory. I think Indonesia now. They were doing it in South Korea before, but now it's in Indonesia, and apparently they're very nice, very good. They're a little bit more expensive now, I think, but they're still very affordable. I think both of these guitars come in at a similar price point at the moment if you're in the United States. I'm in Canada, so everything is wicked expensive here. The RGIB has a little bit of a more scooched feel. The Chapman has a little bit of a longer feel. Chapman is heavier, and if you are the type of person that thinks that heavy guitars mean better tone, then you might like that. I don't like heavy guitars. Personally, I like very light guitars, like Dan Electro's favorite because they're so darn light. The RGIB6 is lighter. It appeals to my aesthetics way more. I don't really like the aesthetics of the Chapman. I will say that the Chapman is probably overall way better guitar for the money. There's nothing wrong with the RGIB. I prefer it, but I think the Chapman is probably the better guitar. I don't know, try both. If you are in the States, go to a guitar center and try both of them. If you're in the UK, go to Anderton's. They have both of them there that you can try as well. Next question from Maxwell. This is the last question. Maxwell Blue. I hope you're not blue today. I hope you're stoked. But if that's your actual last name, it's a pretty cool last name. So I don't know. I hope you are stoked, Mr. Blue.
Bit of constructive feedback. In the editing process, you should cut most of the laughs. Seems like you do it at the end of nearly every sentence and it takes away their impact. Just my 2 cents.
The laughs, yes, I laugh a lot. It's weird. I try to cut a lot of it out. There's a lot of it, if I cut it like right at the laugh, the edit gets weird, like really sketchy. So sometimes I have to leave some of it in, and that's why I got into this habit of like just cutting some of the laugh off, because then for some reason it works in the edit, and yeah, so some people like the laughs, some people don't like the laughs. I like to laugh. I don't know, like, what does it have to do with baritone guitars? I don't know, nothing. I kind of get what you're saying, kind of ruin it for myself because I set myself off. I'm Mr. Joker. There's a bunch of you guys that make this a lot more doable for me, and I really appreciate that, all of you at Patreon. There's a bunch of you now. It's Aaron, Andrew, Anthony, Dennis, Derek, Johan, Mile, Nick, Richard, and Tim. Amazing. Thank you guys for hanging out and helping me out on Patreon. It's like super awesome. And merch, people who help me out with merch. They buy t-shirts and stuff like that. Jonathan, Igor, Leonard, Todd, Anthony, Ramon or Rio, Gil, William, John, David, Jason, Amar. Thank you guys. That's it. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of Stuck with the Bun in 411, and I hope to see you in the next video.